whatever area that you get into, given that even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to, and if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think.
I think the thing that drives me is that I want to be able to think about the future and feel good about that. That we're doing what we can to have the future be as good as possible, to be inspired by what is likely to happen, and to look forward to the next day. So that's what really drives me is trying to figure out how do we make sure that things are great and going to be so, and that's the underlying principle behind Tesla and SpaceX, is that I think it's pretty important that we accelerate the transition to sustainable generation and consumption of energy. It's inevitable, but it matters if it happens sooner or later. And then SpaceX is about helping make life multiplanetary, and doing what we can to continue the dream of Apollo, and ultimately make a contribution to life becoming multiplanetary. And so there's the defensive reason of protecting the future of humanity, ensuring that the light of consciousness is not extinguished should some calamity befall Earth. But personally, I find what gets me more excited is the fact that this would be an incredible adventure. Maybe like the greatest adventure ever. And it would be exciting and inspiring. And there need to be things that excite and inspire people. Yeah. You have to be, reasons why you get up in the morning. It can't just be solving problems. It's got to be, something great's going to happen in the future.
When you had that third failure in a row, did you think, I need to pack this in?
Never.
Why not?
I don't ever give up. I mean, I'd have to be dead or completely incapacitated.
What is that thing that will give your life the extraordinary energy and emotion that allows you to look yourself in the mirror at 3 a.m. in the morning and say, I'm not giving up. I'm going to go and do this regardless what the world throws at you. It's your meaning in life. And it's far more than that. It's massive, meaning it's something that you're excited about. It's transformative, meaning that it's going to change the world in a way that you're proud of, that you want to. And it's purposeful in that it ignites that sort of emotional energy in you. Doing anything big and bold and meaningful in the world is hard. It is hard. And you're going to be facing all kinds of dragons, all kinds of barriers. And it really is your persistence driven by that emotional energy that allows you to overcome.
A couple of years ago, I stopped being a practicing attorney and came up to go to grad school here in New York to pursue a dream of international law and human rights. It's kind of gone up and down. There have been moments of kind of panic or depression, like, why did I kind of take my life down to its foundations for, a dream? When you're just sitting in your house, applying for all these jobs and you're not hearing back from any of them, you feel useless and you feel like, what did I do all of this for? How's this gonna work? Am I even gonna be able to stay in New York City? And then just, even though dog walking isn't the field I came here to pursue, it was just such a relief to have something to do. Like, I needed to get out of the house and to be like part of the fabric of New York again instead of sitting in my apartment feeling sorry for myself. And it was a huge turnaround to be out there walking dogs, doing things, seeing people.
The harder challenge, much harder challenge, is how do people then have meaning? Like a lot of people, they derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have, if you're not needed, if there's not a need for your labor, how do you, what's the meaning? Do you have meaning? Do you feel useless? That's a much harder problem to deal with.
I think there are a lot of platitudes about chasing your dream, like, oh yeah, you should definitely, whatever your dream is, drop everything and pursue it. I certainly still support chasing your dream, but you have to be realistic. You have to be realistic that it might not turn out exactly how you envisioned, and you have to be willing to be flexible with that.
Listen, failure is learning. Failure is your ability to pick up and go again. My biggest successes failed 100 times on the way. I mean, at the end of the day, when I created the X Prize, I launched it, I came up with the idea in 1994, I launched it under the arch in St. Louis in 1996. It perished multiple times, and it was only because the X Prize was fueled by my passion, by my MTP, that I did not give up, that I picked up the broken pieces and started again. So I like to say, it's an overnight success after 10 years of very hard work. And that's the truth. I mean, you fail either because you give up, which means it's not part of your MTP. If it's truly part of your passion, your purpose in life, you're not going to give up. You're going to figure out how to rebirth it again. And you know this more than anybody. Or it failed because you didn't have the right community around you to support you, to help inspire you, to guide you, to give you what you needed. People love supporting big, bold, passionate MTPs because they want to see you succeed. And an MTP is that guide, it's that measuring stick. And then people who don't have an MTP, they're wandering aimlessly. They look at some opportunity, look at another opportunity, have no way of judging, how do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? How do I spend my relationship capital? And without an MTP, you're sort of squandering that. With an MTP, you can say, this is directly on my MTP and I'm going to go for it. This over here, it's exciting, it might make money, but it's not my purpose in life. And therefore, I'm going to refocus and wait for that right opportunity. So that's what an MTP is all about. What I find is a lot of entrepreneurs have a desire to create, they have a desire to make money, they have a desire to sort of do something they can brag about, but they're not driven by an MTP. But on the other side, the biggest, boldest, badass entrepreneurs out there in the world are driven by an MTP. When you look at what Elon is doing, it's really, I'm getting the human race off this planet to Mars. That is my MTP. I'm transforming this planet from a fossil fuel economy to an all-electric economy. That's my MTP. And he can maintain those two MTPs, and they drive him. And when you look at him, the energy, the power, the passion, the conviction that he brings is driven by that MTP. A lot of entrepreneurs are just looking for, their next photo sharing app or their next, way to make money, and it's not something that is going to fuel them for decades ahead. I know at Singularity University, I'm very proud to be the executive chairman and co-founder of SU, and every year we welcome a class of about 90 entrepreneurs from around the world. I say, welcome, you competed against thousands of individuals to be one of 90 here at SU's Global Solutions Program. And I'll ask a very simple question. How many of you here know your purpose in life? More importantly, how many of you know your massively transformative purpose? Something that you would die for and therefore live your life for it. And I'm amazed that in this elite class selected from around the world, that only about half of them know their MTP. If you know your MTP, you are driven in a way with a passion and an energy like none other, and you shine at a level. But at the end of the day, they're not driven by something that lights their heart and their soul on fire. One of the amazing things about being an entrepreneur is that you keep experimenting, you keep trying. But I guarantee you that if you have your MTP, your experiments, what you're going to be doing is going to be far more fruitful. This is something that you're dedicating your life to. But the most beautiful thing about it is that if you're in line with your MTP, if you're in line with your greatest purpose in life, whether you succeed or fail, you're moving your goal forward. You're having an extraordinary life because you're hanging out with amazing people, having conversations, working on things that are directly in line with your joy, with your highest calling in life. And so, whether or not I mine the asteroids, and I hope that I do, it's this big, bold MTP of opening up resources for humanity's use in space. I know that every conversation I have, every piece of hardware that we build at Planetary Resources is moving the game forward. If not for myself, then for humanity. So you can fail over and over and over again, but when you're failing in line with your MTP, you're moving your own game forward.
Purpose? What is purpose? What is purpose? It is something you need or something you acquire to keep you going, to keep you healthy, to keep you sheltered, so you don't have to be like me and live like me. It's not good to be human by any means. You get up, do it again. Get up, do it again. Whatever you aspire to, you get up, do it again. You hope against hope that you don't get hurt, you don't get a disease, you don't get sick, you don't get killed. You don't wind up in an explosion or, in the Twin Towers. And you go on with your life. But it doesn't mean living is good. It just means you're here.
And so sometimes you wonder if you're smart enough. I don't know if I'm smart enough. And a lot of the time, I sit down and I don't think I'm smart enough. And I'm bitter right now because I failed. And I know it'll take a lot of work. And I know some kids are going to get it much easier than I can. But if I find the time, if I work, I'll come out on top. We all have to believe something, and I guess that's what I choose to believe.
When someone says, I don't have time, what they're really saying is, I don't truly know what I want to do, what I love to do. And so it's how you use that time that is so critically important. And when you use that time in service of your MTP, you feel like every second spent is in service of you doing something great and moving the ball forward. When you're scattershot, it's all diluted down to something that's meaningless.
That's a rough question. I'll always be behind because maybe someone else worked harder. Maybe someone else just started out with a better stack of cards than I did. No. I'm sorry, I forgot the question. I just ended up feeling sad.
There's a couple things that can happen if you don't know your why. One is you can suffer malaise at worse depression, and we become very focused on the stuff. So am I working at a name brand company? Am I making the most money? I met a guy recently, it was the husband of a friend of my sister's who was having a hard time. He'd been laid off, and he was having a hard time, and sort of called in a favor and asked him if I would help him. And I went through my process of asking times where he found joy. And basically what I learned was, since he graduated college, every single job he took for the money. Whoever offered him more money was the job he took. And never made a decision based on the people he'd work with, the company he worked for, the culture. Those things never factored. Every job he took was who paid him more money. And now he's in his mid-40s and is literally depressed and lacks focus and And this is what happens. It builds up, which is, yes, he made more money in the short term than all his friends, and now he's jobless. Compared to the people who, as they take jobs, and this is advice that we tell our kids when they graduate school, get a job, but we rarely say get a job you love. And we don't tell them what to look for when they go into a company. Recruiters will always ask, so what are you looking for? And somebody will say, X salary with these kinds of benefits and this kind of vacation. Versus, I'm looking for a mentor. I'm looking for a place that will help me grow. I'm looking to work at a place where I can be myself. These are things to look for. And those are the jobs we should be taking early in our careers. And you absolutely will not make more money than your friends in the short term. You will have more joy on the journey, and you will find yourself in midlife in incredible love with your work and your life. And hard work is not a problem. So I think we confuse stress and passion. Because if you look, when you're passionate for something, well, let's start the other way. If you're stressed about something, if you have a high stress, you work long hours, you miss your family, you toil, you don't know stress. Well, what's passion? You work long hours, you miss your family, The difference is something I want to be a part of and something I don't want to be a part of. That's the only difference. Stress or passion is simply the result of whether this fits into something greater in my life. But if you don't know why you showed up in the first place, you're only going to have stress. You can work doubly as hard and have passion. You can be traveling all around the world, you can still miss your family, you can still hate that side of it, but you will love what you're doing.
I wake up to inspire people to do what inspires them, so together each of us can change our world for the better. It's why I do what I do. It is my raison d'etre. It is my existential purpose and calling.
My why is to propel people forward so they can make their mark on the world.
To enable people to be extraordinary so they can do extraordinary things.
And these things are all deeply, deeply personal to us, right? So we know why we exist. It's to deliver that to the world, to our friends, to each other, to our clients, to whoever in our works. That message has to shine through. It's the greatest compliment somebody says to me about a speech or a book. That was inspiring. I'm like, did it.
A calling, in my mind, is the equivalent of the why. When you know your why, things that resonate with your why become a calling. You feel compelled to do something. I think desires come and go, and they're fleeting, and they're based on sometimes good and sometimes superficial reasons. I have desires to do things that are noble. I have some desires to do things that are short-term fun things. You desire to make a lot of money. You desire to get great perks. But, is that a calling? And the whats are just the tangible things that you can count and that you can do. But I feel very strongly that the work that we do, whether you love your work, whether you call it a calling, whether you call it a cause, that I think they're all sort of part and parcel. I think we should feel like we have a calling. I know that we do. I know for us this is deeply, deeply, deeply personal.
And I think when you realize what your calling is or what your why is, then the what's, which could be a job, it could be a relationship, it could be other things that you choose to spend your time doing, they all become much more clear when you understand what that calling is and what what you're sort of driven to do ultimately in your life. For me, it was really interesting because when I first heard Simon speak about it at this little company event, it wasn't anything new to me. It was something I already knew that I knew it, and I had spent my early career trying to figure out what would I love to do. I knew that it was important to love your job, but I think I was so focused on the job that this concept of why all of a sudden opened up this new perspective for me, which was it's not necessarily about the role that you have or the job that you have. It's how you show up to that job. It's what you contribute. It's the impact that you make. It's the difference that you make in the lives of people. And that just totally opened up my mind to something that I had never really realized before, that it's not about the job. It's not about the role. It's not about the job description. It's about who you can be in whatever role you play. So when you articulate your why, it should be the reason that your colleagues love you, the reason your friends love you, the reason your family loves you. It should be applicable no matter where you show up. You are who you are wherever you are, and it's an articulation of who you are at your natural best, no matter where you show up, right? So you should be able to take that why and sell used cars or work in hospitality or be an attorney. It should be applicable no matter what you do. The biggest I would say the biggest hurdle that people have, or the biggest trap that people fall into, is they feel like they have to shove their what into their why, because they feel like that's what defines them. But what you do does not define who you are.
It's just that I think for most people, you go to do a job and it's, you are that cog in the wheel, and I think I was that, I was a managerial cog, but still, it wasn't that I was forging new ground or marking a new territory or really doing anything. I could have been more ambitious and, gone up the next rung or two, but to me, being up the next rung was basically the same as being where I was. Was I put on earth to accomplish something in particular? I just don't see it that way. I I have feelings about how I should behave, certainly. There are certainly things that I should avoid doing. I don't mean to do any harm. But in terms of some mystical sense of why I'm here and, how I happened to come across you two and, was that in the stars? No, I think it's just because I was walking down the street and so were you. Again, I don't see the overarching concern with purpose. So many different people can give you so many different purposes. Can't all be right. You can say, well, do you have a personal purpose? No, I think if I had not happened along, the world would not be that much different.
I know that when I was a kid, you think of Batman and Superman, superhero, comic book superheroes. These guys are 35 years old in my mind. There's no official rule that says that, but when you're a kid, they're the adult, they're 35 years old. And somehow there was a line in my head that I didn't realize I drew, that wherever I was going, even though I didn't necessarily picture it, that I would be there by 35, because that's, if I were 16 years old and I traveled to the future as my adult self, the 35-year-olds who I'd meet, I don't think I'd be terribly impressed. I think I'd be disappointed in myself a little bit. I've been thinking about getting a gecko. Just for this purpose, because, I went on YouTube, I was looking for little pets. I can't have a cat now, I'm gonna move, too much. But a gecko, you feed him every 2 days, you have a little terrarium he can live in, so on and so forth. So I've put it in my mind now that I'm gonna get a gecko maybe 2 months from now, and I'm gonna put a little bit of my check away so it doesn't impact me too much, and it's something to look forward to, and that might be neat. But it's a little, I don't know, a little disheartening that that's what I'm looking forward to. This is what I need to do to pick myself up to get to the next thing, I don't know.
This began a bunch of years ago when I wrote Start With Why, and I gave this TED Talk about the same concept. And the origin of it came from my own pain. I had a job, I had a small business, I had a small marketing consultancy, and everything superficially was good. We had amazing clients, I had my own little office, I had a couple of employees, I made a decent living, wasn't getting rich, but I made a decent living, and superficially everything was great, I was living the American dream. But it got to the point after a few years of doing it that I didn't want to wake up and do it again. I was depressed, I was lonely, I was paranoid, and all of my energy went into pretending that I was happier, more successful, and more in control than I actually felt. Because I was embarrassed to admit that I didn't want to wake up and do it again. Because superficially, my life looked pretty good. So I hid it from the world, lying, hiding, and faking every day. And it wasn't until a very close friend of mine came to me, concerned about me, did it give me the courage to admit that I had a problem, and then give me the courage to find the solution. The solution that I found was this thing called the why, grounded in the biology of human decision-making. I knew what I did, I knew how I was different from my competition, but I couldn't tell you why I was getting out of bed every morning. And upon finding my why, my passion was restored to levels I'd never experienced before. I had more clarity than I'd ever had, more drive than I'd ever had, more inspired than I ever was. I shared it with my friends started making crazy life changes. They invited me to share it with their friends. I literally would go and give speeches in people's living rooms in New York City. You know, when you have one of those platters you buy at the supermarket with the celery and the dip in the middle, and like that's what we had. And I gave speeches in people's apartments. And I had helped people find their why for $100 on the side. And then people just kept saying, you need to meet someone. Would you talk about this? And I said, sure. It was all I was so passionate about it. It's all I ever talked about. And people kept inviting me to talk about it. And all of a sudden, I'm doing public speaking. I never imagined I'd do public speaking. Then somebody introduced me to a publisher, Adrian Zackheim. He's here, God of Business Publishing, the original publisher from Good to Great. Anyway, we spent 29 minutes together, and 3 days later, he offered me a book deal. And that's how Start With Why happened.
I moved to New York to find my passion, and I found it. Basically, you find something that you love, and you just kind of follow it, and things just kind of like fall into place. And I don't know, when you're like doing what you're meant to do and enjoying what you're meant to do, I think that puts you in touch with like success and happiness and what you're meant to do on earth.
I'd spent a long time over the years in my different careers, but particularly in the military, where you need to be very clear on why it is you're doing what you're doing, particularly if you're asking people to put themselves in harm's way. And I had the real privilege to lead people who were willing and did put themselves in harm's way, and that is one of the most humbling, most lasting, powerful experiences I've ever had. But like many of us, I couldn't put into words what it was that drove me, and so when I came across this very simple and powerful idea called the Golden Circle, for the first time, it gave me the words. And when you start seeing the world through that lens of starting with why, you know, how does it connect with what you believe in? How does it connect with the reason you get out of bed each day? Then it gives you added velocity, added trajectory. It makes life actually a lot easier in terms of the decisions you make, the choices you make on a daily basis, because you can now be intentional around making choices that are going to be fulfilling for you.
The time to find your why is when you want to find it. I never believe that somebody should be forced to find it. I would never tell somebody you have to find it. When you're ready to find it, then find it. If it's when you're 18, do it when you're 18. If it's when you're 24, do it when you're 24. If it's when you're 50, do it when you're 50. But when you are ready, like my rule for me is I won't help anybody find their why unless they ask me. Because you have to want it. You have to want it.